Wait another day for the verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. The case brings to mind a similar incident from Missouri. In June 2020, Mark and Patricia McCloskey became political targets of the left after they stood up to an angry mob of BLM protesters. When a crowd gathered outside of their home, Mark and Patricia used their Second Amendment rights to arm themselves and defend their property. The McCloskeys never fired a single shot, but the liberal media vilified them and smeared them as out-of-control, gun-toting racists.
The McCloskeys are not an aberration. They are not an anomaly. They are a product of their environment because the American environment prioritizes white people, white wealth, and white land at the expense of all others.
Sound familiar? Now they're doing the exact same thing to Kyle Rittenhouse, just another American who was fearful for his life as a BLM protest destroyed a city. Mark McCloskey was in Kenosha today showing support for Rittenhouse, and he joins me now. All right, so what was it like there on the ground, Mark, when you were in Kenosha?
Well, you know, it's really kind of interesting. The steps of the courthouse have been occupied. I've been up here for 2 days by an angry group of screaming and potentially threatening protesters, mostly peaceful protesters, underneath a banner today that said, "Revolution, nothing less." And I was told today, amongst other things, that I was a white supremacist, and that I said to the lady who was screaming this at me, how are you going to bring the country together? How are we going to heal these wounds if you're standing here screaming at me that I'm a white supremacist and I'm the problem? And the answer was that once we've eliminated all you white supremacists, then we'll have peace. And that's the mood outside the courthouse today.
Oh, that sounds like a beautiful time out there on the courthouse steps. So a bunch of anarchists and communists and racists just lobbing threats against you and smearing you. When you saw what happened with Kyle Rittenhouse, and you've seen this develop, you've probably watched a lot of the courtroom stuff, very similar to your situation. What specifically were those similarities? Because it was, again, race and trying to put down anybody that could stand up to a mob.
Well, once again, you have to understand that everything is racism. Even though the crowd that was in front of my house, the mob that broke down my gate and stormed into my property and threatened me with death and raping my wife and burning down my house and killing my dog, despite the fact that in retrospect, when you view the videos, it's mostly white folk. But nonetheless, I was a racist immediately, labeled a racist by the press before the last person left my front yard, and have been labeled such ever since. And then you've got Kyle Rittenhouse, where the President of the United States calls him a white supremacist based on absolutely no evidence. I mean, we have this trend, and it's not just in the Rittenhouse case, but it happened up in Minneapolis, where the vice president, now the vice president, was bailing people out of jail, so they go out and riot the next day. The vice president, the President of the United States, Maxine Waters, all saying in that case that we needed to have the correct verdict, not the one based on the evidence. Not the one based on what the people in the courtroom heard or what the jury heard, but what was politically right for them, or there'd be violence. And that's just, you know, if that's the state of our country, you know, we're in for a world of hurt.
And you also had a crooked prosecutor, remember? She slung a bunch of charges at you, kind of like Binger, you know, just shoot first, ask questions later, and the cases blow up in their face. That case blew up in her face, right? Is she still a DA there, that Soros-funded crooked prosecutor?
She is. She got reelected. Go figure. She's going to be coming up on some ethical charges here in the first of the year, and she may or may not continue to have a license after that. But, you know, they're pursuing my law license on the basis that defending myself, standing on the front porch of the house, my wife and I were engaged in crimes of moral turpitude, and we're not fit to be attorneys any longer. You know, go figure.
Go figure. All right, Mark, you've seen it all. That I can tell you. Thanks for coming on the show. Don't go